Well, I knew of the housing finance agencies from the years that I was a city council member. I got elected first in 1975. I was 27 years old, so I didn't know much, but I, uh, I knew of the housing finance agencies and the work that they did to help us create housing.
My first experience with housing finance agencies was I was a mortgage banker in Pennsylvania, and they used to have allocations for people who made less than $35,000. And I remember going up, standing in line in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, trying to make sure my mortgage bank got an allocation. So that was a fond memory because for those families who actually qualified for the program, it was a life-changing event.
There's the Irish bar right around the corner from NCSHA called the Dubliner. And at that time, there was a highbrow Irish restaurant up above the Dubliner called the Powers Court, which I was fortunate enough that my late brother worked there as a bartender. So every day when he came in and checked in for his evening shift, he would check the reservations for the night, and if there were any Ways and Means Committee members or Senate Finance Committee members that were going to be dining at the Powers Court, I would be strategically seated at the end of the bar. When they came in, they had to go right past me, and I did a lot of lobbying that way.
So the first professional job I had as a houser was working with NCSHA and its members to understand how this new low-income housing tax credit was or wasn't going to work. And what was interesting was the feeling was that it wasn't going to work, that it wasn't generous enough. But there was some folks I think from the Georgia Housing Finance Agency who told me, it takes a little while for people to figure this out, but once they do, it'll fly. And I think they were right.
It is true Congress created the low-income housing tax credit, but Congress didn't think of it. It was the housing sector. It was a bunch of us, and I am proud. In fact, it's one of the proudest parts of my career to have been in the room with those conversations at the very, very outset. And actually, NCSHA, we took the lead in creating the low-income housing tax credit.
There came the moment when Nick Ratsinas, the then head of FHA, came into my office and said, "We've just been doing the analysis on the trajectory of the economy." And he said, "Our calculations are that there will be a very notable national economic expansion, and that housing could really be the beneficiary of this. And if we do certain things and act boldly, we could, on our watch, create the highest level home ownership rate in the United States."
I was always on the lookout for a better delivery system. Federal government is a great organization. It's great doing wholesale. It's not so good doing retail. I needed to find some intermediaries, and being an HFA former director, I saw what the potential was there.
We got the home ownership rate up substantially above that 66%. We were able to get minority home ownership rate right to 50 from 42%. And as a result, the national home ownership rate rose and to record levels. The state housing agencies were an important part of that push on all those fronts.
There were so many of them that were really strong. And so the critical experience for me of HFAs were when we were talking about risk sharing. And FHA really thought that we would deliver more nuanced, more effective products that met local needs if we had partners who were on the ground. And we explored risk sharing with lots of different kinds of institutions, public sector and private sector. And time and again, both single family and multifamily, the work with the HFAs was often the most rewarding and successful because of that aligned interest and high capacity that are in so many of these agencies.
Leading a housing finance agency during the Great Recession was probably the most unique experience I've had professionally. First of all, it was sobering. It was scary at times. The bond markets literally froze up. The housing credit market completely collapsed. Housing finance agencies were managing their variable rate exposure. Liquidity became like the number one issue. And at the same time, the demand became higher because mortgage lenders, traditional lenders left the market. So it was just an incredibly stressful and sobering time. But it was also a time of innovation. I mean, housing finance agencies had to step up. NCSHA was with us the entire time. And we worked very closely with the federal government.
But what really struck me was the determination of the agencies to serve the people in their states and asking us to let's not have little things get in the way of something big. And in this case, something big happened. We passed a new issue bond program. It enabled states to get their footing back and to be able to have liquidity to do the things that they needed to do. It was a landmark difference.
My impression was that, the state housing finance agencies, the fact that they were there, this was an issue that was central to what they did and they weren't going away, meant that there was a really important set of actors who weren't going to give up on that as an issue. And there was a lot of reinvention that happened too, in terms of looking for new tools. And so expanding opportunities to expand who they reach through homeownership education and counseling, through creating new sources of down payment assistance using different funding mechanisms, that has become to be a really important part of HFA's business model that was really developed in those years after the crash.
State housing finance agencies have evolved tremendously. For one, they play a critical role in housing policy in the country, regardless of what the federal or local governments are doing. They are the steady Eddie in housing policy. I think they've also recognized that in addition to supporting housing that's affordable, they play a very large role in supporting housing that's ready for 21st century challenges, like climate risk, like growing homelessness, like addressing the digital divide, like addressing racial inequities.
I would say that I do believe housing finance agencies are well positioned to address some of the systemic racism in housing finance, in that they are, millions of dollars are flowing through them. And I would say that there are three kind of maybe channels in which they could do that. One around anti-poverty and ensuring that they're prioritizing the financing where the need is the greatest. Additionally, incentivizing. So again, on the supply side, incentivizing development in high opportunity areas and funding projects that are proportionate to the need. And so, for instance, here, funding perhaps larger family size units beyond just a one bedroom, two bedroom, multifamily type of a scenario, but our families that we serve happen to also need larger unit sizes.
The most important thing, my big challenge to the HFAs, is to think about their role in changing the things that are barriers to the development of supply, to the exclusionary zoning, to how do they think about what kinds of tools and systems they can bring to the questions of affirmatively furthering fair housing. And this is certainly by race, by geography, by ethnicity, by ability, all of these different dimensions. It's really important. I believe that HFAs need to be thinking about how they do their work to solve these problems in ways that are going to close equity gaps and build that into their decision making, build analytics about equity into their decision making, and be part of building systems and structures that are making progress on all these issues.
Right now, we're about 1 million housing units short in this nation. And I'm talking about everything from public housing all the way to high-end housing. But we're 1 million units short, and that's what's causing this outrageous rise in prices. So the more we can build and the more we can work with NCSHA to be able to build affordable first-time homebuyer housing, we'll be a lot better off as a country.
Well, certainly I would say continue to work together as a group. states face many of the same challenges, whether it's regulatory barriers. That to me is I know something that NCSHA has been focused on for years. But they all want to help create opportunities for first-time home buyers. They all want to help ensure that the most vulnerable populations have safe, sanitary, and decent housing. So I think to the degree that they can continue to work together with HUD, with USDA, with FHFA, with VA, the key stakeholders, and make sure that dialogue is there, that it's not static, that it's always evolving. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat administration, Republican administration. Again, the degree that they can all work together, especially through the voice of a national association like NCSHA, again, I think makes for a much more productive process.
HFAs always want to be innovative. They're always thinking about new ways to serve their state. I'm excited about something that happened just last week where we announced that we're now going to include rental payments in credit history. I think that the HFAs will take that idea, and some of them are doing it already, and I think they'll apply it, and I think there'll be more borrowers who qualify.
I think there's a difference between doing something because it's the efficient way to do it, and doing something because it's the most effective way to do it overall. And I look for that, both efficiency and effectiveness. I see the federal government doing what they do with vouchers, with national sort of credit standards, with sort of national programs. I see local governments do partnerships. I see HFAs as incubators for innovation and new ideas.
It's not just about that family somehow having to find housing that night. It's about our hopes for better education, for jobs, for training, for housing stability, for children to grow up in the proper settings. That's what housing actually is and what it means. And we can get miracles of accomplishment from people and families if we can help them stabilize their lives with a place to live. Yes, it's always helpful when there is a federal budget dedicated to housing and when there are new legislations and new vouchers and new provisions. But state by state, we can make a difference, and the state housing finance agencies are the key.